Something strange has been happening. Recently, at around 3 a.m., I can hear the sound of my letterbox being opened. It sounds like it's popping open. It's quite a loud sound. There's no sound of it closing. It just seems to stay open. Then when I try to get back to sleep, or forget about it, I hear it snap shut. On the inside of my apartment, there is a cage around the letterbox to catch any newspapers and magazines from hitting the ground. I go over and check, later, to see if anything has been posted, and nothing ever has. This has been going on for a little while now. I told one of my friends about it online. They thought it was weird, but I didn't want to pursue it. Even if someone was opening my mail slot, they probably wouldn't be able to look inside of my apartment due to that newspaper cage thing. I forgot the correct name, but I have one of those intercoms in my apartment. When someone rings the bell, a live video feed appears on the monitor so I can see who's out there. I could press that button at any time to see a live feed outside. It doesn't happen every night, but sometimes I forget about it. I'm a bit of a chicken. So the idea of looking at that live stream when that letterbox sound happens is a bit too scary. But I knew I would have to at some point. And that's where I made my first mistake. I was up late as usual, watching videos online, and I heard the sound of the letterbox pop open. Ah, you're back, I thought as I crept over to the door. I hit the live feed button. The video display was very narrow. You would only be able to see if someone was stood directly in front of it. I don't think I would be able to see if someone was crouching down. So with that in mind, I half expected to see nothing when I flicked on the monitor. But I was wrong. Someone was out there. A finger was stretched up towards the camera. It appeared to be attempting to rub or scratch the lens. What the hell is that? I got goosebumps. It was really eerie to see that at that time of night. For a moment, I doubted if this was actually happening. I looked over towards the door to make sure it was locked, and then I went back to the monitor. The hand and fingers continued to gently caress the lens. I watched the continuous motion. It seemed to be endless. I thought the owner of that hand would get tired. I couldn't look at it. I had to keep looking away and then back to him. The monitor is on a timer, and when it turns off, it makes a loud beeping noise. It's pretty loud during the day, but even louder at nighttime when it's quiet. If I didn't hold down the monitor button, then it would do an auto shut-off within 1 minute. I was so nervous and creeped out. I made a mistake. Due to the sweat on my finger, I slipped and lost pressure on the button. I heard a loud beep sound. Then, about 3 seconds later, my doorbell starts ringing like crazy. When someone rings the doorbell, the monitor automatically turns on, like those Ring doorbells. When the doorbell came on, all I could see were the fingers covering the lens. I was utterly terrified at this point. It wasn't normal. I watched the monitor as I saw a hand continuously press on the doorbell. I don't know how long this went on for, but I couldn't take it anymore. I approached the door. My bathroom is close to the front door, so for some reason I decided to position myself half in and out of the bathroom. From there, I shouted that I was going to call the police, and a response came.
Huh? Why?
It was the voice of a woman. Her voice was high-pitched and quite innocent sounding. That voice terrified me. Way more than any male voice. To hear a sweet and innocent voice so late at night was really unnerving. I guess that could be due to the influence of horror films. I shouted again and I told her I was calling the police, and she replied,
Oh really? Are you calling them?
What the hell was going on? The doorbell fell silent, and so did the mysterious woman out there. There was nothing but silence out in the hall. I was shaking. I felt as if something else was about to happen. The fear of anticipation had me. I expected to hear the doorbell or knocking, but I heard something else. I heard a familiar sound, the sound of the letterbox slot flipping open. I couldn't move at first, but then I went back to the monitor. I wanted to see why this person was always messing with the letterbox. I hit the button, but I couldn't see her out there. I guessed that it was all over. They must have taken my threat of calling the police seriously. I thought I'd be fine, but I couldn't get to sleep that night. I waited for the light of the morning to illuminate my apartment. I got ready for work. Once ready, I went to leave, but I noticed something in the letterbox cage. There were long strands of jet black hair all bundled up there. There wasn't a small amount of hair. There were thick clumps of it. It was as if someone shaved their head and posted it through my door. I've never seen anything that creepy in my life. I didn't know what to do. I had to go to work, so I guess I would just have to leave it there until I got home. That would give me some time to think about my next steps too. I didn't want to go home that day. I just kept thinking about the night before and all that hair. With that in mind, I decided to go to a bar with a coworker. That was a nice distraction, but as the night grew later and darker, I started to get more worried about returning to my apartment. The noise of the letterbox opening didn't happen every night, so I told myself I'd probably be alright if I went home, but the image of all that hair disturbed me too deeply. I asked to stay at my colleague's house. He let me, and I had a sound night of sleep. In the morning, I heard him shriek. I went to find him, and he was stood by the door. He had a newspaper open in his hands, and I was already worried about what I was about to see. I had a bad feeling in my stomach. There was hair in the newspaper. Shorter hair, if you know what I mean. It was as if it had been sprinkled amongst the pages. I felt like there was no escape. She must have been watching me. I was horrified. I still didn't understand what the hair was supposed to mean. We threw away the newspaper and the hair and headed off to work. I kept looking behind me. I was growing increasingly paranoid. I was worried that someone was following me. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. I didn't see anyone following me or watching me. I didn't want to go home after work, but I knew that I needed to. I couldn't wear the same clothes for a third day. I pleaded with my colleague to come with me, but he said he wouldn't because he was scared by my experience and didn't want anything to do with it. I decided to call my parents as I approached my apartment. I couldn't see anyone hanging around the building or near my door. I got into my apartment and quickly locked the door and shut the curtains. I then went about checking everywhere, under the bed, in the shower, anywhere I thought a person might hide, but there was no one there. I pulled a chair into the corner of the lounge and turned on the TV and just sat there. Nothing happened that night. Before I left for work in the morning, I checked the mail cage. New things were in there. Dead cockroaches in an empty can of tuna. It was a mess. I hate cockroaches, they really creep me out. Once I got rid of all the weird stuff in the mail cage, I heard the sound of what I thought was a kick at the door. I hated it. I waited a few moments, looked out there, and the coast was clear. And that's all that happened that day, thankfully. Enough was enough, though. It was time to go to the police. The officer said the following.
If it's a man versus a woman, what have you got to worry about? What's the danger? Just lock the door and come back when something actually happens.
I hated that officer. He could fuck off. Later that night, while I was alone at home, I heard a familiar sound. I knew it was the sound of the letterbox opening. I braced myself. I heard some other weird noise accompany it, like something was being pushed through the letterbox. I wondered what the hell was being fed in. I was shaking as I approached the door. A pill, like medicine, was dropped through the mail slot. It started bouncing and scattering on the hardwood floor. I hit the button and activated the monitor. She was there. A woman was there. She slowly rose to face the camera, and she opened her mouth wide. She made this crazy, slow, exaggerated motion. She placed a pill on her tongue, then closed her mouth. While smiling, she rolled the pill around in her mouth, and then she would open her mouth, stick out her tongue, and then again pluck the pill from her tongue. She bent down, and I heard the sound of the pill that had just been in her mouth bounce and skitter along my floor. She then popped back up to the monitor to repeat the process. It was so gross. I shouted at her to stop. I just hoped and prayed that she would leave me alone. After a few more pills posted, it looked like she was slowing, perhaps even stopping. She did, but then she started doing something different. She stood there directly in front of the camera and slowly moved her head from side to side, as if to indicate no. She did this about 6 or 7 times. And then she left, and that was it for the night. The next night, the doorbell rang out at about 3 a.m. again. This time she spoke.
Excuse me, could you watch my luggage whilst I'm away? I'll be back, just please keep an eye on it.
This time she was wearing a hat. I knew it was her. I could tell by the voice and the way her messy hair was poking out from under the hat. I chose not to answer.
I'll just leave this here then. Okay, hi everyone, it's Jay here. I just want to say, this next part gets more and more disturbing. So if that's something you want to opt out of now, it's your last chance.
I wanted to know what she was planning on leaving outside my apartment, so I hit the monitor. Even though the footage was grainy, I could see that there was a cat out there. She held it up to the lens. It was already dead. I won't say much about this incident, but in the morning, before I headed to work, I cleaned it up and I buried the poor creature. That was the point where tears actually came to my eyes. I literally felt helpless. I felt as if my sanity was slipping too, due to the lack of sleep and incessant visits from that woman. Cockroaches and now a cat. I dread to think what was going to be next. With that in mind, I went back to the police. I really hate them. They didn't take me seriously at all. I swear they won't do a thing unless someone has been killed. I think they were already laughing before I left the station. When I got home that night, I noticed something. There was a big red circle on the door. Written in the middle of the circle was my name. I don't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but it creeped me out. I looked around the hall to make sure the coast was clear, and then I headed into my apartment and quickly locked the door. Something was wrong. There was something in the mail cage again. An animal leg. I called the police. They actually came this time.
Oh, that's pretty unusual,
the officer said. I felt like screaming at him, but I had no energy. He assured me that he would increase the number of patrols in the area. The following day was a scheduled day off for me, so I got up early and went to my rental company. I wanted out of that apartment. I told them that I would do anything to get out of there. Then a day or two after meeting with that real estate agent, the woman stopped coming to my apartment. I wondered if the woman had become as tired as I was with all of it. A few more days went by and my confidence was slowly returning. I headed home one night after work, and when I grabbed the door handle, I felt a strange sensation on my palm. It tingled. I looked at the door handle, and there was hair there. It was almost as if it was tied on like a ribbon. I shuddered. I wanted to go in as soon as possible. I put my key in the door, twisted the handle, but the door didn't budge. I stood there confused. I twisted the door handle again, and I still couldn't get in. What the hell was going on now? I wondered. I stood there for a moment, not knowing why it didn't open. Then it dawned on me. The door was already unlocked, and I was just locking it. Did I forget to lock the door when I left? Maybe all the lack of sleep and, unfortunately, excessive alcohol made me a bit too careless. I should have just left it and not gone into my apartment, but for some reason I did. I walked right in. The first thing I noticed was the sound of water. Not the continuous sound of flowing water, but the sound of like a faucet or a tap dripping. It echoed through my silent apartment. I hit the lights in the hall. No one was there. I walked around with my phone in hand. I noticed that there was a boxed lunch sat on the kitchen table. It was a bento lunch. I took a closer look at it, and there were dead cockroaches and wads of hair mashed into the food. There was more. I noticed that the fridge was open. I looked in. I was incredibly nervous. There were 3 plastic bottles full of reddish liquid. I called the cops and got out of my apartment. They came right away. I guess that was because of what they saw last time. According to the police, the bottles were filled with blood and water. The blood came from 2 different individuals. They told me to go somewhere safe and to give them some time to search the apartment. After about an hour, an officer called me, and he sounded pretty nervous. They found something in the bedroom. They said that there was a huge amount of thumbtacks hidden under my sheets. They were beneath the fabric of the pillows too. He said there were hundreds of them. On the balcony, each one of my clothes pegs had the same weird hair ribbon that I found on my door handle tied onto them. And also they discovered a pair of women's underwear hung up on the washing line. They said that underwear was soiled. They said it was far too dangerous for me to stay in my apartment that night, and they advised me to stay with a friend or a relative. My parents' house was too far away to get there that night. I don't have a license and the last train had already left. So I decided, well, maybe begged, to stay with that colleague friend of mine who put me up last time. After that, I only went back to my place when I needed to get clothes. I wasn't going to spend a minute longer in there than I had to, until my lettings agent sorted the move out. I paid for a moving company to pick up my belongings. They told me they had found some strange things in my apartment. There was a phrase written again and again in several places, under the bed, behind a chest of drawers, behind my computer monitor, in other blind spots in the apartment. It was my name and some woman's name, and the phrase, "Love you to the point of death." It was written on these yellow pieces of paper in red writing. They were everywhere. It was almost like witchcraft or a curse, like she had put them all over my home with the hope that they had influence over me. Were all these things she was doing to show love? The wording of that made me think of the dead insects and the cat. Was she talking about the finality of life, death, and love in the only way she could? I don't know, but like they say, there is method sometimes to the madness. I was shocked, but I could see the end in sight. Those movers calling me and telling me that everything was boxed up and the keys had been returned was like a weight off my shoulders. I have moved on now, and I am living happily and peacefully. Just don't expect me to tell you where.